welcome everyone. This is Patriot Podcast. My name is Steven. This is my wife Amber here, and we have a very exciting episode today. Our guest, Mike Cavaggioni. He is one of our great friends. He's actually been a mentor to us in several different ways, and we're very excited to bring him on. He has a wealth of knowledge. Just a very exciting episode that we've got here going on. Please be sure to check out the show notes after this is all said and done. We've got a lot of information down there, and I don't want to start this off with just a bunch of me talking some crap. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with this. I want to have Amber. You've got Mike's bio. I want to have you open it up for Mike's bio here.
Yeah. So military is a small place, right? We've been connected to Mike through another veteran, and that's just how it works in the veteran community. So we met Mike through another Navy veteran, and Mike actually retired from the Navy as an officer. He served 20 years, and then he decided to just switch to entrepreneurship, right, and start focus on the financial freedom aspect of his life after the Navy. So he became a realtor and a financial coach, an investor. So started doing that because he wanted to become financially independent by the age of 38, right? That's the dream. So now Mike hosts the Average Joe Finances podcast. You might have heard of that. It's in the top 1% internationally ranked podcast. So he started that just to kind of share some of those experiences, bring on guests, share their adventures through them becoming financially independent, learn from those folks, a lot like we're doing here. So glad to have Mike on. I'm sure he'll share more about what he's doing and what he's got going on. So we're excited. Thanks, Mike.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm super excited to be here, and thanks for that wonderful intro. It makes me kind of feel like I'm doing something pretty cool out there. So appreciate that.
Absolutely. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the questions and all that, Mike, I got to ask you, part of what we do here on the Patriot Podcast is we always have a drink ready to go. That's one of our things. So what are you drinking on over there, Mike?
So it's still early out here in Hawaii, so I am still drinking my coffee. As you probably saw me take a sip earlier, so yeah, I'm still putting that down. And yeah, coffee, man, it's one of those habits I can't kick from the Navy. Coffee is life.
That's right. In the Army, we always say that coffee is the lifeblood of the Army. But for me, being that I have recently retired, I've started to grow my beard. It's 5 o'clock somewhere for this guy. So my drink of choice for today is this Shinerbach Tex Hex. It's a double hazy IPA made with cactus water. Shout out to Shinerbach if you're ever in Texas or if you're anywhere really. Please do yourself a favor and pick one of these up. All right. So let's get into the meat and potatoes now that I've got a tasty beverage to there's Amber's mimosa. Yeah. You have to let us know what you're drinking.
Yeah, so what's interesting about what I'm drinking is I am also in Hawaii, and I am sitting in an airport lounge, a United Airport lounge, drinking a mimosa, right? That's legal, right, Mike? Like you're drinking coffee, I'm drinking mimosa. I mean, it's orange juice, it's breakfast time, right?
Hey,
it's fine.
Mimosa is a morning drink, you know?
It is. So I'm drinking a mimosa, and actually, I know that's something that you talk about on your podcast, Mike, is how to maximize your credit card benefits and which credit cards to get. And so I am sitting here in a United lounge, drinking a free mimosa, and I got upgraded for free on an international flight, all through some of those things that you can actually take advantage of, whether you're active duty or a veteran. So pretty cool. We'll have to make that into a whole nother episode. I know you've done it before.
Yeah, right on. That's awesome. Got to utilize those points.
Yeah, for sure.
We've got a bit of a situation going on behind me. I apologize. I had to mute my microphone because we've got something going on outside. There's a whole lot of work getting done to our house right now, so projects are everywhere, and I apologize for being distracted.
We'll edit that out. It's okay.
No, I want to be completely genuine and authentic on this podcast. We're just going to keep it rolling. Right? So, give me your thoughts on that real quick, Mike. Just a couple of minutes on that. You are an insanely successful podcaster, and for everyone listening to this podcast, check out the show notes. I'm going to link Mike's podcast. It's called the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I highly recommend that everybody go check that out, whether you're military or not. But being that you have been in the podcasting business and obviously way more successful than we are, how do you feel about being authentic and genuine on your podcast?
So I love that question, right? Because when I first started podcasting, I think one of the biggest things for me was I was like, oh, it needs to be perfect. I need to cut out all of those filler words. I need to cut out the ums and the ahs because I am a terrible pauser. So I will always fill that silence with something besides what just happened just now, because you had your thing going on. But I will fill that silence with something like with a so or what if I'm thinking about something. And I was always like, I need to take this out. Even just now when I said that, like that's not even the right words to use. I just use it as a filler. So I like to fill it up the space. And then, as I'm editing it and I'm looking at the transcripts and I'm like, some of these, I was like, I got to take some of these out. And when I do that, I started to notice that the podcast itself starts to sound a little bit robotic, right? Like not natural sounding. So I will take uhs and ums out, right? But not all of them. And I won't take out all of the pauses and things like that. If it's just like a regular pause, like there's just silence, I'll take that out. But if there's just like, me using a filler word to fill something, I'm not going to take that out because it's just, I like the natural sounding. You want to sound conversational when you're having a podcast, right? You don't want somebody to listen to your show and just be like, it's just constant words, 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 then all of a sudden they get this soup sandwich in their head and they're trying to figure out what you're talking about. And because it's just constant, there's no breaks. There's no, breaks on your ears or anything. So I like it to sound a little bit more natural. Everybody else has their preferences. Some people want to make sure that no matter what, they take all that filler out. That's fine. If you can make it sound good that way, then by all means do it. But a lot of times when you take some of that filler stuff out, it will really make the podcast sound like a little bit clunky. So yeah, I like your natural approach. I think it's great.
That's wisdom right there from a long time, very successful podcaster. I will take it. But because the content of this particular podcast is supposed to be centered around, it's all about military, it's all about real estate. Those are the two main aspects of what we always want to be able to talk about. So I'll go ahead. I'd like to start asking you some questions and really start picking your brain about your experience. So much like Amber said, you were a 20-year Navy officer. You chose to take your focus from the Navy, obviously after a 20-year retirement, which congratulations, by the way. I tried to get to 20 myself and I only got to 18 in about a half. So well done. I will never match your accomplishment when it comes to the amount of time that you served in our armed forces, but I do appreciate your service, brother. As with everybody else that's listening to this podcast, thank you for standing up for our country and fighting for what you believe in. And we always appreciate your service. So now that that's out of the way, we can focus. I really want to get down to the weeds as far as your experience with going from a military career to a career in the real estate industry. And you've got a lot of other things going on, but in your experience, now that you are where you are, what would you describe to our audience was some of those major pulls that brought you into the realm of real estate, of investing? Like, why did you decide? What was it that made you go, yes, that's what I'm going to do?
So I like this question, but it all started way back when I was a young kid, probably about 10 years old. I would go visit my uncle in upstate New York, and when we're up there, he was always talking to me about buying properties, and I would ask him like, "Hey, uncle, why do you have so many homes up here?" And he told me like, at the time he was working for the state as a corrections officer, and he would tell me, "Hey, I'm just trying to make sure that when I retire from my job, that my pension's not going to be enough to survive and stay in New York. So I want to have something else that's going to supplement that." And basically what he told me is like, hey, I'm going to retire from this and I want to, between the 1st and the 5th, drive around and collect rent checks. I said, oh, that sounds pretty good, right? So it's always been in the back of my head, right? So fast forward, I joined the Navy. I buy my first property when I was 22. I become an E5, I think like a year before. So I'd been an E5 for about a year. So I got my first property. I just got married, and the big thing there was like my wife and I, we were like, before we have kids, we want to have a house. Like we want to buy a home and then we'll start talking about having kids. So that's what we did. We bought our house and then we had our first kid, right? Now we bought that house in 2007 and we all know what happened the next couple
in
years, right?
2008.
Yeah, and I wound up having a PCS back to Norfolk, Virginia. This property was in Waynesboro, Virginia, and I put it on the market and it just wouldn't sell. So I was able to get a renter in there, another recruiter at a closer recruiting station. He needed a bigger place to live, and I said, "Hey, man, rent my place," and I rented it to him at a loss. So I was losing between $350 to $400 a month, right? So that kind of hurt. But then fast forward to when I actually sold it, I had to short sell it. I paid $250 for this property. I short sold it in 2012 for $167. So very painful. 157 or 160. It's either 157 or 167. I can't remember right now, but either way, it was a painful process. I thought I lost my VA benefit, and I thought that was it, right? So I was enlisted at the time. I wound up commissioning as an officer later on in 2012, and we moved into base housing. I wanted to move into the officer base housing. We were renting at the time. Then we moved into base housing. I didn't want to buy any more real estate. I was kind of like done with it. I had a bad taste in my mouth. So we lived in base housing for another 5 years. I got orders to Hawaii, but during that process, while we were living in base housing, we actually came up with a way to pay off all of our debt. Because while we had that home, I maxed out all my credit cards. I took out personal loans and other things just to make sure we could stay afloat so we can have our place that we live together, and then also be able to keep the house as long as we can to sell it at a better price. And eventually I just gave in and had to short sell it. I kind of wish I would have did that earlier and not maxed out on my credit cards holding on to it. So that kind of really stung as well. But we wound up in a lot of debt. So I had like $28,000 of credit card debt. I had a couple $1,000s in personal loans. It was about $40,000 total. And in a 2-year span, we paid off that debt and saved up $40,000 on a single income. I was a 01 at the time. And became an 02 in that process as well. And then we wound up getting orders to Hawaii. We came out to Hawaii. We had this 40 grand in the bank. All of our debt was paid off. My credit scores were looking a lot better. And I said, you know what? Going to Hawaii, I was like, we need to buy a home. I was like, I don't want to live in base housing. I was looking at the market in Hawaii. I said, if we buy a house and we just hold it, even if we're just there for 3 years and then wind up going somewhere else, we're going to make money on this property. So, because I was starting to get back into it. I was looking at the numbers of real estate and I'm like, okay, I was starting to feel it again. So we buy this property and I run into a buddy of mine who I was on the Theodore Roosevelt with, and he had a portfolio of, at the time, about 28 properties. And we just got to chatting about it. And he's like, Mike, you should really consider investing in real estate again. Because at the time, like, we paid off our debt and I was doing like the safe route. I was investing in my TSP. I was investing in index funds and I was kind of just trying to play it safe, And then I was like, well, I do need something. I was like, I'm getting closer to retirement. I need to kind of shift my focus a bit because when I retire from the Navy, like, it's not going to be enough. And we fell in love with Hawaii. So we're like, we want to stay here. So that's not going to work. So shifted my focus there. I found a couple deals that I was interested in. We had lunch. The thing was selling my wife on this, right? So we went and had lunch with my friends and I brought the deals that I had found over. Actually, my wife found one of them and I found the other one. And we actually, after we looked and the numbers looked really good for both, we actually went with the deal that my wife found. And we wound up going in on it because she saw what they had. She was looking at their portfolio, looking at their numbers, and she's like, wow, you guys make how much per month off of these properties? This looks like it could be something lucrative. So she's like, okay, you know what? Fine. Let's do it. So we buy this duplex back in Chesapeake, Virginia. And now we started this process November 2019. We closed on the property February 5th, 2020. So just think about that date. What happened the very next month? Well, the world ended because of COVID.
Yep.
And I had a tenant that lost their job. They couldn't pay rent and I couldn't evict them because it was an eviction moratorium. There was nothing we could do. And I wanted to do whatever I could to help this guy anyway, because the whole thing just sucked for everybody, right? And nobody was sure what was going to happen with the real estate market. Well, anyway, about 6 months into it, I found a rent repayment program because, real estate investors, you know, we get scrappy and we try to figure things out when the going gets tough. And I found this program that actually back paid all of his rent plus the late payments. So now the property cash flowed $950 a month after I got all that back pay. Otherwise, before that, I was just breaking even with my downstairs tenant.
Wow.
So that worked out really nice. And then I sold that property a year later because throughout that process, I was going to all these Zoom meetings and meetups, learning about multifamily real estate and still being active duty in the Navy. I was like, this property that I had back in Virginia, I was like, I couldn't fly to go check it out because we had that military travel ban that was going on. So everything I did there was sight unseen. I got pictures and videos from the guy that went there to look at it for me. That was it. So I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that again. So as I was learning about multifamily, I was like, oh, this limited partner thing, like this seems pretty cool because it's completely passive for me. I just basically give them my money and it's like a loan pretty much. And I just get a return on it. And then my money at the end doubles and I get my money back. And yeah, I think that's pretty cool. So as I, got comfortable with these guys that I was, going to their meetings and watching, I watched them do a couple deals first and, talk to some other people that were investing with them, asking them questions like, hey, how's your experience been with investing with these guys? And I just got a really good feeling when I was, learning about them and just vetting them and looking at their background. So I wound up investing with this group. It's actually, I've got these two plaques back here. You can't see it on this camera, but I've got two plaques back here from that particular investment group. And that first deal was 102 units, right, back in Roanoke, Virginia. And it just felt good to be able to be part of something like that, that I was able to be a partner on something so big and so massive, right? And I'm going down to Phoenix because I'm going to speak at a conference just to talk about networking in general. And when I'm down there, I get an opportunity. Somebody reaches out to me, a guest that I had on my podcast, and said, hey, I got this small 36 unit deal. I'd like to bring you in on it. Like, we're only bringing a couple people in. And she's like, after talking to you on your show, I think this would be a good investment for you. And again, I only want to keep this with close, people that are close to me. So I said, okay, I'll check it out. I did some research on it and said, this actually looks like a really good deal. So I jumped on it. So I got into that one. And then 2 weeks later, closed on another one with the group that I was with the first time. So I had 3 syndications, like back to back to back. And I just thought it was so neat. And now I'm getting these returns. And I kind of fell in love with multifamily. And now I'm doing more stuff on the GP side. So I'm actually under contract right now for a deal as a GP. So I'm really excited about that and just, getting into that process now. So, but yeah, that's pretty much how I got to where I'm at with the real estate side. I know it's kind of long winded, but that's kind of like the whole story right there.
Well, no, that's awesome. First off, that short, about 5 or 6 minute spiel about everything that you've gone through. I mean, for anybody that has dipped their toes into real estate can extract just how many different opportunities are in that explanation that you've got there. And what's crazy too is I want to take a step back to what you were just talking about. Roanoke, Virginia was actually where I did my 4 years of high school. I used to live in Roanoke, Virginia. What a small world.
Yeah, that first property I bought was in Waynesboro, so in the Shenandoah Valley. So it's beautiful out there, man. Beautiful.
I agree. Well, shout out to Virginia there. But like we were talking about, so there's, Amber and I, when it comes to our real estate journey, there were some very particular things that I wanted to understand before we bought our first house. So what we decided to do was we formed Patriot Investment Alliance. We went into real estate as sort of a company in itself with a board of directors. But, when it comes to the average Joe, right, going off of your company, when you think about the average Joe, the E5, the E6, the O1, whoever it is in the military, when they catch on to the idea that real estate might be something that they want to go towards, or perhaps if they're active duty, they could see real estate just like you did as an opportunity to gain assets, to start to amortize some loans, to start build equity in something, to maybe, create some creative opportunities for themselves in the future. But when it comes to the opportunities and the benefits that we have as service members, one of those things, as we all know that we have all used before, is the VA home loan. And what's weird, I wouldn't say weird.
Not all veterans use that. There's still actually a
Exactly.
surprising number, a very scary number of veterans that don't even know that they have this benefit.
Exactly. We personally, I just had a conversation with Amber today. There are some family members that we have that have not taken advantage of their VA home loan benefit. So when it comes to that, is there anything that you can share with our audience? Because that's really who this question is for. Can you address maybe some of those roadblocks that they think are there, or perhaps address some of the challenges that they think they're going to face, or maybe just alleviate some of the misconceptions about the VA home loan that might exist?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And as a real estate agent, because I got my license too, it's one of the things that I see a lot, because I work with a lot of veterans and I work with a lot of active duty folks. One of the most common misconceptions you see is that people feel like the VA loan, it's harder to close a loan on, right? It's harder to get that loan approved to purchase a home. So there's like this stigma around it that like, oh, if somebody's coming in with a VA loan, we're not going to accept it, right? And that's simply not true. There's so many more realtors now that understand how the VA loan process actually works, and that it's a really, really great loan product for veterans to use. And some of the other misconceptions, right? Oh, if the home appraises too low, I'm going to lose my loan. I can't use the VA loan. No,
Yeah.
that's not true. Now, you do have to make up the difference in cost, but you're not going to lose that VA home loan benefit. Another thing too, like people are looking at the interest rates nowadays and they're like, oh man, I can't believe, the interest rate on a single family home is this much. Well, it's always a little bit lower on a VA loan. So if you
Yep.
have that VA home loan benefit, instead of going conventional or, doing an FHA loan because you're worried someone's not going to accept it, you got to think about how much more you're paying in that interest. And on top of that, besides this being a 0% down loan, any other loan that's conventional or FHA, anything that where it's 20% or less that you're putting down, you're paying, that mortgage insurance, right? You're paying PMI. And if you think about how much that costs in the long run,
Mm-hmm.
it could be very expensive because that PMI that you're paying is a guarantee that if you were to default, that provides coverage to the lender that they're going to get all their money back, right? Whereas the VA home loan, there is no PMI. That guarantee comes from the VA, no matter what.
Yep.
They say, we guarantee we will cover this veteran, and that's all you have to worry about. Like, you don't have to worry about anything else. So that's another great piece of the VA home loan benefit. And then, of course, the other thing that I mentioned too, 0% down. I mean, you can't find any other products out there that are 0% down, right? Unless it's like a HELOC or something. And a lot of times those, still require, they'll only give you like 80% LTV or 70% LTV, like loan to value, right? So you're not going to see any real products out there that are 0% down.
Yep.
Another thing too, the VA used to have a cap on the amount you can finance on a VA home loan. That is now gone. So a lot of people still are under the impression that, oh, well, I can't, buy a house more than $456,000. Otherwise, I got to put some type of down payment. Not true. In 2021, they completely changed the rules. I'll give you an example. I bought my home out here in 2018 in Virginia. I used my VA home loan. The cap in Hawaii was like $721,000. The house that I bought was $785,000. So that remaining difference, I had to put a fourth of that. I had to put 20% of that down. Right. Which is fine, whatever. Compared to if I had to put 3, 5, 10, or 20% down if I was buying it with another loan product, man, what a huge difference, right? Another thing about the VA home loan, if you're a veteran and you have at least 10% disability rating, that VA funding fee goes down by a large number. It goes from like 3.5 to like 1.1. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I'd have to look at it again, but I know it goes down significantly. Maybe it's like 1.7. But either way, that VA funding fee, because that's probably where you spend the most money on the VA loan, which oh, by the way, that usually gets rolled into the loan. Like, you're still not coming out of pocket with that. So there's just a couple things about the VA home loan that people should know about. I highly recommend. There's so many VA home loan seminars and courses out there. Go to one. There's a place out here in Hawaii called Align Mortgage that they give a VA home loan seminar every month, and I've gone to a couple of them, and I'm always learning something new. Right? I went to them when I was still active duty and learning about the VA home loan for my own personal use. And now as a real estate agent, I attend some of these because it's just there's always something new. Any changes, you want to learn about that stuff, because I want to make sure when I'm talking to a veteran or a active duty person that's looking to use that benefit, I want to make sure I'm giving them the most relevant and current information possible. So pay attention to your benefits. If you're a veteran, even if you're still active duty, pay attention, because when you do get out, a lot of the benefits you have right now in active duty get accelerated, or they're even better after you get out. So just know what you're entitled to, because it can really go a long way.
I very much agree. Excuse me. Amber and I, have used lots of our VA benefits, and I can tell you personally, just from our perspective and experience, there are amazing benefits out there. And honestly, I'm not the smartest guy. I'll tell you that right now. I was a 13 Fox, a field artillery. Well, we call them fisters, which could be taken out of context. But I still
in our
see
community,
myself
a lot
as
of that stuff's taken out of context.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right, though. The VA is insane when it comes to benefits. I highly encourage everyone to actually do their due diligence, much like we do in real estate, and look at the VA. You're right. Tap into some resources. And one particular resource that veterans can use if they're listening to this episode and they're like, hey, look, I want to reach out to, maybe I don't know who to reach out to. Maybe I just need to reach out to this Mike. If anyone is listening to this and they want to reach out and ask you specific questions about the VA, or much like you were talking about earlier, perhaps syndications or investing or stocks or whatever it is, how do people go about like reaching out to you? This is kind of where I turn the episode into the plug part. Give us an idea about like Average Joe Finances. What does it mean for veterans, and why should they be contacting you?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. So Average Joe Finances, that's my podcast. It's where I'm talking about, all different kinds of topics towards financial literacy and financial freedom. So we don't talk about just real estate. We talk about, I've had people that come on and talk about the stock market, safe investing in like index funds and mutual funds. I've had people that come on and talk about the FIRE movement. I have people that come on. One of my recent guests I've had coming on talking about precious metals. I've had people that come on and talk about crypto and NFTs, and I still don't know enough about that stuff. So that's why I bring those people on to talk about it. For those things aren't for me, but I prefer real estate. That's kind of my baby. Most of the folks that come on my show, like we're usually talking about real estate. So a lot of my episodes are real estate based. But I have a lot of military folks that come on the show as well that share their real estate investing stories. So for the veterans that are out there, like those are the episodes you really want to focus on, because there is a lot of great information. And one of the things that I love to do with my podcast, because I use it as a learning tool myself, like as I was learning about multifamily, I was bringing on folks that did multifamily investing onto my show and asking them the questions I wanted to ask them. It's one of those things you get to selfishly do as a host, right? But for me, it was beneficial because I was learning. And then I realized if it's providing me this much benefit, it's providing somebody else that's listening that much benefit as well. So I always talk to my guests like beforehand. I'm like, hey, I'd like to keep this podcast as conversational as possible. And what I like to do as well is, hey, talk to me like a fifth grader. I want you to explain things to me like I've never heard of this stuff before. Even as I got smarter on these topics and really felt like I had a really good grasp on it, I would ask those questions. Like if somebody said, oh yeah, our KPIs, I was like, what's a KPI? I want you to explain to me what a key performance indicator is, right? So these are the things that I want to make sure that if this is the first episode, someone comes to listen to my podcast, they're not intimidated and decide, this guy's talking too advanced for me, and this is not what I'm not going to learn anything here. I want to make sure somebody shows up, they listen to my podcast, and they say, oh, this guy, him and his guests, they put it in a way for me to understand it right away. Like there's no, I have to go look stuff up in the dictionary or look things up. and that's the way I like to do things. I don't want somebody to get thrown off. I want somebody to listen to one episode and say, oh, you know what, I'm going to go back and listen to these other ones because this guy gets me, right? And that's the focus. Like that's why it's called the Average Joe Finances Podcast. We want to talk to the average Joe, the average Jane, right? We want to make sure that when you're listening, it's at your comfort level, right? And I'm not saying that, oh, it's because I'm making it so that it's people that don't understand complex real estate or anything like that. No, it's none of that. It's just like going to a networking event and you're talking to somebody about real estate. I want my podcast to have that same feel. So Average Joe Finances Podcast, you can check it out, averagejoefinances.com. But anything for me as well, like if you want to get in touch with me, my website, my personal website is mikecavaggioni.com. My last name is spelled Cavaggioni. But that's got all my links, my social media, like all my social media is like at Mike Cavaggioni. And then you can email me, Mike at averagejoefinances.com or Mike at mikecavaggioni.com, Mike at whatever.com. That's usually me. So as long as it's one of my websites.
That's awesome. And I think that is a huge piece that a lot of people get wrong. Or I wouldn't say that people get wrong, but maybe a misconception about real estate. In our experience, I think a very key aspect of the success in regards to anyone's personal or group real estate journey is that networking piece. I have found more opportunities through my network than I have found going through realtors or websites or whatever it is. And I cannot stress it enough. One of the reasons why I got connected to you is because I got connected to Brian. Like, I don't know very many Navy folks, and I'm not saying that that's like a deliberate thing. I love Navy folks, but the networking aspect of real estate is what I would maybe characterize as underutilized, if that makes sense. But before we go too far, I know my better half here, Amber, she's got some amazing question and some insane insight that I haven't brought forward yet. So I want to send it over to you, babe, for a question.
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking as you were talking about the VA loan. I actually have a dovetail off the VA loan, especially for young people that are serving right now, or maybe veterans that even did 4 years and they don't realize they still have that benefit, right? A lot of times people, they do a few years in the military and they don't even realize that they're veterans. Like that's a thing. I've heard that from people. Like, oh, I can call myself a veteran even though I didn't retire or I didn't deploy. Yes, you're a veteran and you still have those benefits, right? As long as you served honorably. So I had a question for you as far as, we heard your investing story of how you got involved in investing. So what advice would you give yourself, or what advice would you give a young soldier, airman, seaman out there right now who is maybe has never used their VA loan and is actually thinking ahead and thinking about investing? What can you do with your VA loan? Not just to buy your family a single family home and use your VA loan for that, but there's a lot of folks out there, us as E4s and E3s, probably thinking ahead a little bit, thinking they want to invest. So what would you give them as advice for how can they use that to actually start investing in the market right now?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question because it brings me back to when I was still active duty and working with junior sailors and talking to them about, how to focus their career to be financially independent. So by the time they retire, or even if they want to get out before 20 years, that they're going to be in a much better place than if they were to just follow, the standard American diet of financial literacy, right? And the reason why I call it the standard American diet, because the acronym is SAD. The standard American diet is SAD, but also when it comes to financial literacy, it's also SAD, right? Because we don't give, just people in general the right tools, but let alone our service members. Yeah, we have some financial literacy courses, but there's not really much there that goes to help you. So some of the things that I've told junior sailors and that I would still tell them today is, if you're thinking about buying a place and you're going to use your VA loan, well, first of all, do you know that you have this opportunity? Do you know that you can use the VA loan? A lot of folks think too, if they're still on active duty, like, oh, well, I'm not a veteran yet, so I can't use this VA benefit because I'm not a veteran. And I'm like, that's 100% not true. If you're still in, it's one of the best times to use it because, you get to utilize that the military gives you for housing to buy a tax depreciating asset, right? So you're using tax-free dollars to pay for that mortgage, but then claiming all of the interest that you paid on that mortgage and getting that on your tax return, right? With tax-free money. So it's a free, if you look at it that way, it's a free property, and that's insane, right? So it's all about your mindset and how you're looking at things, right? You could say, oh, well, with the BAH, I make this much per month, and the mortgage costs this much, so yeah, my BAH covers it. If your BAH covers your mortgage payment and your home expenses, you're living in a free home, right?
Yeah.
Because if you were put in base housing, guess what? They're going to take that BAH away. Or if you're living, in the barracks or anything like that, BAH gets taken away, and you're just making your regular paycheck. So if you think about the fact that you can get this tax depreciating asset essentially for free, it's absolutely insane. And then the other thing too, if you're military and you want to buy a bigger place, house hack, right? Or if you're in a market where it's a little bit tougher, like out here in Hawaii, I know folks that come out here, they'll buy a place and they'll rent out rooms to their buddies, right? And in doing so, they get half their mortgage paid by the people that are renting it out, and the other half gets paid by their BH, but they got this much bigger asset now, and they stay here for 3 years, and when they leave, they sell the place, and they make all of this money that appreciated over that 3-year span. Hawaii usually appreciates 3 to 5% every year. So if you think about it, the average median household price out here is just over $1 million. So if you think of it going up 3 to 5% every year, I mean, that's $30,000 a year, right? So over a 3-year period, you're looking at 90 to 150K that you're going to make profit selling that house. So it's definitely something you want to consider. So house hacking is another thing. There's a lot of folks, you PCS all over, right? As you're going to different duty stations, I know folks that will buy a property at every duty station that they go to, and they'll use their VA home loan at each one. So yes, now, like I mentioned before, there is no cap, right? But wherever you buy wherever you use that VA loan for the first time, whatever that area is, there is a cap on the amount you can use for a second loan, right? And on that second loan, it can't be over whatever the for that area is. Like the benefit can't be more than that. So like example, out here in Hawaii, I think the max is $1,050,000, I think is what it is out here right now. So if you buy a property out here in Hawaii for $700,000, or you get a condo for $500,000, right? And then you PCS somewhere else, but you want to keep that as a rental property, wherever else you go to, as long as it's in between that 500 and 1,050,000, like you can still be covered by the VA loan. So if you move to a cheaper area where the prices of homes are 250, 300, 400,000, right? You can go buy that $400,000 house and still have it 100% financed through the VA, because you still fall under that cap in Hawaii where your primary residence was, right? The other thing you could do is, after you've had it for a little while, if you are getting close to that cap, is just do a refinance into a conventional. Like if you've already got 20% of it paid off, refinance it into a conventional loan. Or if the value of the home has gone up enough, refinance it, take out 80% on the loan, pay off your VA loan, and now you've got your VA loan home loan benefit back, the full benefit, right? And you use that to go buy your next property wherever you PCS to. So if you do this and you do a full career in the military and you PCS 5, 6, 7 times, that's 5, 6, 7 properties, cash flowing properties that you now have when you retire to add on to your retirement and possible disability benefits or anything else like that. And you might not realize that, it might not take that many properties for you to be in a really good spot, right? And that first property you bought when you were, on your first duty station, and now it's 20 years later and you retired, and that mortgage is damn near paid off, and that home appreciated 30, 40% over that 20-year period, you're going to be a very happy person when you go to sell it. So minus taxes, right? Because everyone's going to get caught on that, unless you 1031 exchange it into another rental property, and that's just one of the ways to get around it. But obviously, consult a CPA and things like that. That's the disclaimer here. Talk to a tax
Yes.
professional. But there are so many different ways that you can now take this real estate and defer your taxes, or again, like I was saying before, take some of the interest that you're paying on these mortgages, claim that against your taxes, and help lower your tax burden in general off of your base pay in the military. So there's so many different benefits that you can do just from having a VA loan. And I know it might sound minuscule, but there is so many things that you can get out of this if you strategize and do it the right way.
Thank you for
totally
that.
agree.
That got me excited. Now I just want to go back 20 years, rejoin, and buy a house at every duty
We all
station.
do. We all want to
Yeah.
go back 20 years and say, man, I wish I would have did that. I say that all the time. And that's why this message for junior soldiers, sailors, airmen is so important, right? This is the message that you want to get out to them now, because if they start now at this younger age, by the time they're our age and old and broken and retired, they're set. Like they won't have to work anymore. They'll get out of the military and they'll be like, oh, I'm in my 30s or early 40s and I'm retired. Let's go drink Mai Tais on the beach because I can, right? So that's the goal. That's where you want to get folks to. And look, if you're going to serve a full career in the military, you deserve that, right? Because I can tell you
Yeah.
after 20 years in the Navy, man, it breaks you. It breaks you down, right? So being able to give yourself that freedom at the end when you serve 20 years to protect everyone else's freedom, that's the reward you get at the end, right? So you get your pension, you get any type of disability benefits, and now you've got these rental properties that are paying you for as long as you hold on to them. And it's just, life's good,
I agree. And don't worry, Marines, Coast Guard, and Space Force.
Oh
We are
yeah,
not forgetting
you're
about you.
included in there. My bad.
You are absolutely included. But
And I
Amber,
realize the word is not seaman, right? It's not seaman, it's sailor. Okay, got
Well,
it.
yeah, I mean, no, junior sailor is a seaman, right? But seaman,
I'm
fireman,
learning.
airmen, because we have them as well. But usually we just refer to them as sailors. Now, Marines are Department of the Navy, so I just kind of lump them in there. So that's why I'm saying, Coast Guard, they're our baby brother sailors, so they're lumped in
there
there
you
too.
go.
Space Force, we're figuring that out, but they're the Guardians, so got to have
Yeah,
them
is that what
included
they
too.
landed on? Was the Guardians?
Yeah. That's what they're called,
Wow.
Guardians,
Okay.
which is,
All right.
I mean, that's pretty dope. Like, I don't know, like
I
if I
agree.
was still in, like I was considering trying to move over to the Space Force just so I could say, like, when I retired, like, yeah, I retired as a Guardian of the Galaxy. I just thought that was so cool.
Okay, I didn't think about that, but that's true. Babe, you had something else?
Yeah, just this is a unique thing that I heard you say that I'm curious to know more about. You mentioned your wife and how she was and you listened to her smartly, right? When you bought your first property back in 2007. One of the reasons that Stephen and I decided to go into real estate is because it's something that we could do as a family. It's something that we could do as a couple. It's a vision that we could share together and a company that we could build. And we nerd out all day, every day, talking about ideas. And like our pillow talk has become real estate talk, right? And it's different than we were both active duty, but we did different jobs, so we couldn't really relate on that level. And I think it's something that people don't think about when it comes to holistic health, the health of your marriage, right? And having a common goal. And just the fact that you mentioned your wife leads me to believe that she's also involved in your real estate ventures. So how has that gone for you? I'm curious to know. Yes.
So at first, she was heavily involved when we first got into it, and then the whole thing with the property in Chesapeake happened and COVID, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm kind of out at this point." So now she's like, "Hey, you do what you want to do. Just tell me about it, and just make sure that we're in a good spot." So yeah, it's not like it was when we first started. Now we've kind of actually this came out of a mastermind that I was in, where like it was one of the things that we actually used to kind of bump heads on because sometimes we weren't on the same page when it came to like a deal or something like that. Because I looked at it from a different perspective than what she looks at it from, right? She looks at debt a different way than I look at debt, right? And this is all from past experiences that we went through. We kind of coped with it in different ways, and that's one of the things I think that's been really good for us is we're very open with each other about any type of issues or anything that's bothering us. So I think that's one of the things that's been very helpful. Now, when it comes to what we do in real estate now, she doesn't really get involved too much, but she likes when I talk about it with her. I don't want to just be like, oh, hey, I got into this deal. I say, hey, look, this opportunity came up and this is what I'm thinking about doing. And she'll be like, hey, go for it, babe. Do you, right? Or she'll be like, well, this sounds a little, maybe we should talk about it. And then we do. And we, especially when it comes to our finances, we talk all the time. We usually have a quarterly sit down where we sit down and actually go over everything. But we're doing something else too that she's actually getting a little more involved in. We're doing velocity banking with our HELOC. We used it to buy some more real estate. We also use it to pay down our mortgage sooner. I mean, we could pay off our house in 6.5 years if we wanted to. I don't want to do that. She does. So that's one of the things we still bump heads on because our interest rate is 2.25%. And I feel like that's free money to me on a mortgage, and I don't want to pay it off earlier. So I said, I'd rather take whatever we would use to pay that off and buy a cash flowing asset that will pay the mortgage for us so that we have something else that's appreciating. So that's kind of one of the things that we're still working through right now. So I'm trying to get her to read a couple books that I've read that I think will help her understand that a little bit better. And then we'll be on the same page when it comes to that. But overall, when it comes to your finances, whatever you're investing in, you need to have your partner on the same page as you. Because if you don't, you will bump heads. And I experienced that myself. And now we're very open about everything that we're doing together. And we make sure we all know what's going on. And we talk about it, right? You have to talk about it. You can't just be like, oh, hey, I did this. Man, that is a recipe for divorce. Okay. You can't just be like, oh, I did A, B, C, and D. And oh, yeah, sure. No problem. Oh, you spent how much? Wait, what? That could really cause problems. So yeah, be open and honest with your partner about whatever it is that you guys are doing. Even if it's not something they're interested in, make sure they know and that they feel like they're part of it. Right. And that's one of the ways that we kind of became a team, but also kind of separate at the same time. And that's one of the things I was talking about, like at that mastermind that I learned. I felt like I was in marriage counseling when I went to this mastermind because I brought this up. I said, hey, I was like, here's what I'm trying to do. This is what I want to do. And then like my wife doesn't want to do this. She'd rather go this route. And like at that mastermind, like literally like people were telling me like, okay, have you actually sat down and gone over all these numbers with your wife and gone over with this, maybe having her as your real estate partner isn't the best thing. Having her as your life partner, yes, but as a real estate partner, you guys are clashing too much. So why don't you separate that? Let her be involved on this side, you be involved on this side. So she's more the finance person. And it's funny because my podcast is Average Joe Finances. She's really the brains behind the finances of our household, honestly. I kind of just go whatever way she wants to, and then she kind of goes with whatever way I want to with the real estate. But that's where we find each other. We complement each other's strengths, right? I'm great with finances too, but when it comes to what makes her comfortable, I let her take care of that because I want to make sure that we're not doing anything that causes a rift in the relationship. So we both have our lanes, but we come together like when we have these, like going over like what's happening, what are we working on, what's our net worth right now. That's one of the things we review every quarter as well. What's our net worth? What's going up? What's going down? Where are we having problems? She helped me recognize one of the businesses that I had that was failing that I had to offload. And because of her input, I was able to kind of, between that and a mastermind that I was in, I was able to be like, okay, I've got to let this thing go. Right. Where for me, I had like this personal, I want to see this thing succeed. And I had a hard time letting it go. And I had to have like multiple people tell me. And then finally my wife tell me like, hey, dude, she put her hand on my shoulder, like, it's going to be okay, but you got to let that go. And that's where we complement each other. So I think knowing each other's strengths and complementing each other's strengths, knowing each other's weaknesses, complementing each other's weaknesses, that's where you get that quote unquote power couple status, right? And like the two of you, like you guys are on the same page when it comes to your real estate, right? So you guys could sit there and have those conversations where I know with the conversations I have to have with my wife when it comes to real estate, have to be a little bit different. Like, I have to explain to her, this is what I'm working on, and here's why this works. And then, we'll talk about the financial aspect, and then she'll look at the numbers and say, okay, this works because of A, B, C, and D. And that's where we complement each other. So
That
does
is
that make sense? Or
huge.
did I just confuse the
Yeah,
hell out
that
of
is
everybody?
awesome. No,
Okay.
that's awesome. I love it. Smart man. It sounds like listening to your wife is helping pay off. And I love the idea
We listen to each other.
of yeah,
It's
they're
happy
okay.
spouse,
All right,
happy
I'll give
house,
it to you.
not happy wife, happy life. Happy spouse, happy
No, I
house.
agree. I agree. I
Uh,
agree. But the
our-
fact that you are doing a quarterly training meeting, we're going to implement that. Love it, babe. Put it on the calendar. Quarterly
Thanks,
training
Mike.
meetings. Got to make it happen.
Oh, my bad, man. I'm kidding.
The good idea fairy just came out.
Well, actually, have you guys ever read The One Thing or listened to the podcast or anything like that? If not, definitely recommend checking out that book and listening to that podcast. But we actually did a One Thing retreat for ourselves. We actually did a staycation out here in Hawaii because we couldn't actually go to the event in November. So at the very beginning of the year in January, we go out to the Halikoa out here and we just, okay, what are our goals for the year? What are we trying to accomplish? Everything. And then quarterly, here's what we're going to talk about. Here's what we're going to do. We talked about everything from our finances to what the school plan for our kids was going to look like, to what summer plans and travel and vacation was going to look like, everything. We just put this all together, and they have like a guide and a checklist for you to follow, and it's great. And we did that, and it's one of those things that really helped change our relationship when it comes to the communication about all aspects of everything that we're doing, besides not only just our relationship, but also the finances, the stuff we're investing in, the stuff that our kids are involved in. So that's definitely something I recommend to any couples out there. Definitely look at The One Thing and maybe go to their retreat if you can.
We will definitely look into that. I'll grab that resource and I'll list that down in the show notes. But in order to get this wrapped up, I really want to continue the length of this episode, and I want to continue to pick your brain, Mike, because your resources, your knowledge, and your expertise are very, very valuable. And again, I'm really glad that you were able to be a guest on our podcast. I do want to return the favor. I would like to earn a spot on yours as well at some point. But please check out the show notes. If you're listening to this podcast, you're military or otherwise, it doesn't matter who you are. We want to be there to help you out. Our thing is we started this podcast because we want to simply add value. Now, our experience and our background is all military. So I find it much easier for us to converse and have some dialogue about what that means when it comes to real estate investing in general. But our one overarching goal is to simply add value. And Mike, I feel like you really did that to our podcast today. So I really appreciate it. If you find that you like this episode, please hit that like button. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We're going to be constantly coming out with some new content, having guests every single episode that we publish. And again, what I wanted to touch on just as a final note is I love contrarian investing. And I think that's what some of these techniques and tactics that we discussed talk about or kind of allude to. So please reach out to us. I'll list all of our resources in the show notes as well. I really want to get some traction, and I really want to increase the volume of your audience as well, Mike. So no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what branch of the service you're in, there's always people out there that want to help you, including ourselves. So please feel free to reach out to us. But we're going to go ahead and wrap it up from here. Again, Mike, huge thank you. Huge shout out goes out to you, brother. Even though you're Navy and we're Army, it doesn't matter. We still served. We're brothers in arms. We're sisters in arms. So really appreciate the time. I know you had to take time away from your family. So I really appreciate that. And I'll actually let you have the last word on this episode. So what else can you leave us off with, Mike?
Well, I just want to say, thank you guys so much for having me on your show. Anytime I get to be a guest on a podcast, I love podcasting, right? But anytime I get to be a guest on a podcast, it really feels like an honor to be on a show, especially one like this, where you guys are focused on reaching out to veterans and active duty members, like people that I feel akin to, right? And to be able to put an impact out there for folks like that have served this country, to me is very impactful. And so I want to thank you guys for what you're doing with this show. And I really hope that it impacts as many veterans as possible. But the way I look at it is like, if you could change one life, then you've done your job, right? If you could change more than one, then that's fantastic. But if you could change one person's life, you did your job. So you guys, you're out here changing lives. So I want to thank you for what you're doing. And you're definitely more than welcome on my podcast anytime. Let me know. We'll set that up. Would love to have you on the show, talk about your real estate journey and what you guys are doing. I think that would be really fun. So for sure. Definitely would return the favor.
Awesome. Amber, go ahead.
Nope. Just want to say thanks. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for coming on.
Thank
Some
you.
time out of your Hawaii
enjoy
morning.
your flight and have a safe
Yeah.
trip, and enjoy the lounge that you're in right now that you earned with those points.
Right? Yeah. My flight just got delayed, so I still have a few hours, but that's okay. That's why the lounges are nice.
At least you get the comfort, right? So
yeah, exactly.
And that's another at least like 2 or 3 mimosas.
I might just end up staying in the lounge if I do that. So
There you go. All right, guys. Hey, Mike, again, really appreciate you, brother. We'll talk soon.
all right, aloha.